It's hard to believe that Fallout 4 was released nearly 9 years ago. In these years, the Fallout community has had time to fully reflect and look back on this game. Some mark Fallout 4 as the start of the downfall of this series, but I've always found this a bit unfair. While I do agree that 4 was a step down from New Vegas in a lot of ways, I still think 4 is a great game in its own right, and I've got hundreds of hours of enjoyment from it. However, I do have my fair share of issues with the game. That's why I decided to compile a list of 5 things Fallout 4 got wrong. Now these are all just my opinion, and your list might look different from mine, but regardless, let's get into the list. Speech has always been a huge part of the Fallout series. It wasn't uncommon for NPCs to have paragraphs worth of dialogue, and you could sit for multiple minutes talking to them. This is why Fallout 4's speech system was such a disappointment. Instead of the in-depth dialogue system we had before, we now have a Mass Effect style speech wheel. There's a multitude of reasons why this doesn't work. Let's start with the limited options. The speech wheel will always have 4 options, no matter the situation. The obvious problem is, what if we need more than 4 options? In a game that's all about making your own choices, you're now automatically locked to 4 speech options. This also works for the inverse. Sometimes you only need 1 or 2 options, but now you have to have 4 no matter what. Usually the 4 options boil down to yes, no, give me more information, and be a sarcastic dick. Another gripe, due to the character limit of the wheel, it doesn't always tell you exactly what you're going to say. Sometimes I'll click on an option thinking I know what it'll say, only to then say something I didn't want to say at all. The biggest offender of this is sarcastic. Whenever you use this, there's a 50-50 chance you'll just insult someone to their face rather than be sarcastic. Take a look here.
Hope you got what you were looking for inside my head. I was right. I should have killed you when you were on ice.
You want to try for round 2? Let's go!
What? What are you talking about?
How was that sarcastic? I didn't want to say that. If I'm role-playing as my character, I want to be fully in control of what I say, not some dice roll like this. The last downside is a voice protagonist. Fallout 4 was the first, and hopefully last, game in the series to feature a voiced protagonist. Now I want to stress that the voice actors of Nate and Nora did an amazing job. This isn't a slight at them at the least. It's just that the voice protagonist doesn't really suit the Fallout series. There are plenty of great RPGs that have voice protagonists. The difference is, in games like The Witcher 3, you're Geralt of Rivia. In Mass Effect, you're General Shepard. Much of your backstory is already predetermined, and so are your choices to a certain degree. Fallout just isn't like this. The voice protagonist hinders a lot of the role-playing aspects of the game. Thankfully, it seems like Bethesda have learned from their mistakes and improved upon speech in later games, but it's still one of my standout issues in Fallout 4. Fallout 4 completely overhauled the weapon modding system, and while I think this was for the better, this brought with it a real lack of weapon variety. The game just has so few weapons. They seemingly thought that the weapon modding would make up for the lackluster weapon library, but it just wasn't enough. Most mods are just straight stat boosts that don't really change the gun all that much. You can change stuff like the optic or ammo capacity, but does that really change the gun that much? It feels like 80% of the weapons out in the Commonwealth are just a base pipe pistol. In 3 in New Vegas, it seemed like your enemies had a much wider arsenal. They could wield anything from 10mm pistols, Chinese assault rifles, or a variety of other things. In 4, it's just pipe weapons. There's also a big lack of unique weapons in the game. There are a few, like the Broadsider or the Deliverer, but they are few and far between. Instead, we have the legendary weapons. Legendary weapons were a noble attempt at adding some much needed weapon variety, but it doesn't do the best job either. There are almost 50 legendary effects available, but only like 7 of them aren't garbage. Maybe I was a bit spoiled by Gunrunner's arsenal in New Vegas, but I was still let down by the seemingly small pool of weapons in Fallout 4. Fallout seemingly did the impossible by carving out its own distinct identity in the heavily oversaturated post-apocalyptic genre. It did this by having a very unique art style that made it instantly recognizable for even non-fans. Fallout 4 takes this art style and makes everything fat. I'm sorry, but everything in Fallout 4 gained 50 pounds, and it does not hold that weight well. The weapons, armor, and even most of the items are also big and bulky now. The series has always been drenched in retrofuturism, but it just looks so much worse in 4. Now, Fallout 4 was the first Fallout of the PS4 Xbox One generation. New consoles bring with it more advanced graphics, so we all expected Fallout 4 to look a bit different than 3 in New Vegas. The only issue is that in some ways, 4 looks much worse than those two games. I'm not going to tell you that Fallout 3 and New Vegas are amazing looking games, because they're not. Their art style for the most part still holds up really well. Even the more controversial choices like 3's green tint gives the game a unique identity. The art style in 4 just comes across as bland and honestly looks so bad. The NPCs come across like some cartoon skinwalkers too. I genuinely don't understand how they look this bad. Skyrim, a game that came out 4 years prior on weaker hardware, managed to have much better looking NPCs. I feel like the older games look the way they do due to hardware limitations, whereas 4 looks this way due to some odd stylistic choice. This choice honestly makes the game look too clean. The game doesn't come off as generic or anything, but New Vegas and especially 3 felt dark and dreary. It was able to convey just how ruined this world truly was without saying anything. 4 does have moments like these, but it really clashes with the game's visuals. Also, the assault rifle looks like shit. Bethesda have never really been known for their great writing, and sadly Fallout 4 was no exception to this. The writing for the main questline is especially baffling. The main offender of this is Sean. Sean is weird. Giving the player a child was a bold move, and it wasn't done all too well. Making Sean an infant, terrible choice. Babies are dumb. They're just incredibly hard to relate to as a player. Genuine question, how many of you actually gave a shit about Sean during your first playthrough of Fallout 4? I'm guessing not a lot of you. This choice is only made stranger later in the game when they do eventually age Sean up to 10. Why not have him start out this age in the intro? Have us interact with him a bit so when he does go missing later, we care more. The Institute is also such a bizarre faction to have. Whenever you side with them, they're painted as this hyper-advanced technological group that only wants what's best for the Commonwealth. There is no acknowledgement of the kidnapping and murdering they do for seemingly no reason. It's obvious that they wanted to frame the Institute as a bad guy early on, but also wanted them to come off as an appealing faction later. There were just so many aspects of the game that just felt undercooked and underdeveloped. Take a look at the Gunners. They had potential to be one of the major factions in the game, but they ended up being nothing. Even smaller factions like the Atom Cats had potential to rival smaller factions like the Kings, but not enough time was put into them. There are plenty of examples I could point to, but my main issue is that the writing just felt subpar for the series. I don't have extremely high expectations, all I want is well thought out characters and factions. Personally, my biggest disappointment with Fallout 4 had to be the removal of skills and other various RPG mechanics. Fallout has and always will be an RPG series. We may get the occasional spin-off that delves into other genres, but the core identity of Fallout will always be that of an RPG. Fallout 4 is an RPG, I want to make that clear. However, 4 saw the removal of many key features that made the series great. I'll start with one of my favorites, skills. For those unfamiliar, skills were attributes that you could invest in and improve upon throughout your playthrough. Examples include repair, medicine, speech, and guns. These gave so much depth to character creation and roleplay. Your character could be a doctor that uses melee weapons, or a gun nut that's really good at repairing. There would be times in-game where you could use your skills to get alternate quest routes, or even some bonuses. Not only was it more immersive, but you felt rewarded for putting time into your character. 4 ditched the skill system in favor of its own oversimplified perk tree. Rather than investing in your medicine skill to heal yourself more, all you need to do is take ranks in the medicine perk. This is disappointing not only because it gives the player less choice, but it oversimplifies an almost perfect system we had previously. 4 also got rid of the trait system. Originally stemming from the OG games and making a return in New Vegas, traits are optional gameplay modifiers that usually offer a pro and con to taking them. This risk versus reward system is really fun and adds a ton of replayability to the game. These are just gone, without a trace. Makes me sad, man. Now, do all these exemptions make Fallout 4 bad? No. However, if these RPG mechanics were fully implemented and put on full display, it would be a much greater game for it. Those are 5 of my biggest issues with Fallout 4. Even with all these issues, Fallout 4 is still one of my favorite games of all time. Hopefully Fallout 5 takes these mistakes, learns from them, and improves upon them. If you liked the video, liking and subscribing really helps the channel out a lot. I think that's all for me. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.